ever driven all over town, like on a wild goose chase, just trying to get a prescription filled?
Right, like a pharmacy scavenger hunt.
It sounds crazy, right? Like something out of a movie. But for a growing number of communities, sadly, this is becoming the new normal.
Yeah, it's becoming a real problem.
We're talking about pharmacy deserts, and today we're really going to dive deep into this, trying to figure out, why is this happening and what does it mean for everyday people like you and me?
It's a critical issue, and it boils down to access to vital health care. Imagine for a moment living in a town where the closest pharmacy is, say, a 30-minute drive each way. Now, picture yourself, maybe an elderly resident or someone dealing with a chronic illness. That quick errand suddenly becomes a major ordeal.
Absolutely, and that's the reality right now in New Lebanon, Ohio. It's this town of about 3,700 people, and they just lost their only pharmacy.
Wow.
Think about that for a second. An entire town with no pharmacy.
That's really concerning.
So today, we're going to investigate what led to this, and more importantly, what are the potential consequences for these communities, and hopefully uncover some possible solutions.
It's definitely a complex issue. It's not just one thing. There are a lot of factors at play. It's like a puzzle, really, with all these different pieces that we need to try and put together.
Okay, so let's start with one of those pieces, a big one, the wave of pharmacy closures we've seen, especially those big chains like Rite Aid.
Right, those are hard to miss.
They filed for bankruptcy last year, and one of their big moves was shutting down a staggering 800 stores.
800.
800. And get this, Ohio, where our town of New Lebanon is, was hit especially hard. They lost a staggering 180 Rite Aids, mostly in these smaller towns and cities.
And the impact goes beyond just those empty storefronts. It creates a ripple effect. Some studies have shown that property values can plummet and other businesses start closing down as well. It's like this downward spiral.
It's really disheartening to hear stories like that of, say, Joyce Damon, a resident of New Lebanon. She went from having three local pharmacies just 2 years ago to now having 0.
Wow.
Now she and her husband, they have to drive a good half hour to another town just to get their prescriptions filled.
Yeah, that's a real barrier for so many people. Not everyone has access to reliable transportation. And for those with limited mobility or resources, even a short trip can be, really difficult. It really highlights how important this issue of access to healthcare really is.
Speaking of access, let's talk about pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs for short. They've become quite the hot topic in this whole pharmacy desert debate. But before we get into the controversy surrounding them, I think it's important to understand what they are and what role they play in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it can get a little complicated, right? So think of PBMs like the ultimate negotiators in this whole medication world. They're the go-between for the drug manufacturers, the ones making the drugs, and the insurance companies.
Okay, so they're like the middlemen.
Exactly. They're the deal makers. They haggle over drug prices, they decide which drugs will be covered by insurance plans, like creating an exclusive list, and then they manage all those prescription claims that come through.
So on the surface, it seems like they're trying to get the best deals for everyone involved. Where does the problem come in? Why are so many people pointing fingers at them?
Well, some argue that in their quest for these best deals, PBMs are essentially squeezing pharmacies, pushing for lower and lower reimbursement rates.
Yeah.
What that means is pharmacies are getting paid less for dispensing medications than it actually costs them to stock and dispense those medications.
So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, basically?
Exactly. And this is where Miranda Rochel's perspective is really interesting. She's worked at Walgreens and now is a senior VP at a healthcare technology company. So she's seen this firsthand from different angles.
She's been pretty vocal about PBMs, hasn't she?
Yeah, she argues that they're essentially directing profits towards their own pharmacies because some PBMs actually own pharmacies, while these independent and smaller pharmacies are left struggling to keep their doors open.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because even the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, has gotten involved. They recently filed a lawsuit against a few big PBMs, claiming that they're actually inflating drug prices.
Right, and this is where it gets even juicier. The FTC, in their report, revealed that PBMs actually control a whopping 80% of all prescriptions filled in the U.S.
80%? Seriously?
80%, which is a staggering amount of power and influence when you think about it.
It makes you wonder, is there another side to this story? What do the PBMs have to say about all of this?
You're right, there are always multiple perspectives. The Pharmaceutical Care Management Association, which represents the PBM industry, they push back on these claims. They say that independent pharmacies actually receive higher reimbursement rates compared to those big chain pharmacies.
Interesting. So it's not as cut and dry as it might seem on the surface.
Exactly. They argue that other factors are contributing to these pharmacy closures, things like online competition. More and more people are ordering their medications online these days. And then there's the rise of these dollar stores that are now offering discounted medications. It's a different landscape out there.
Right, like Amazon getting into the game, offering same-day prescription delivery soon to cover almost half the country. It's definitely shaking things up a bit.
Absolutely. It's a multifaceted issue, right? While PBMs might be an easy target, it's more nuanced. But here's the thing. Even with all those different viewpoints and factors, the National Community Pharmacists Association, they released some data recently that's pretty concerning. They found that a staggering 99%, that's almost every single pharmacy they surveyed, has experienced reduced reimbursements from insurance plans and their PBMs. And over half are being reimbursed less than what it cost them for almost a third of their prescriptions.
Wow, 99%. That's a pretty clear indicator that something's not quite right.
Yeah, and it really raises the question, what happens to patients, the people who rely on these pharmacies, when they disappear?
It's about more than just inconvenience, isn't it? It's about people's health and well-being.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to explore next.
It really makes you think about the human side of all this. We're not just talking about numbers and bottom lines here, but actual people.
Exactly, and that's where we need to shift our focus from the business of pharmacies to the people they serve. It's about understanding the real human cost of these pharmacy deserts.
We've talked about the inconvenience, sure, but what does losing a local pharmacy really mean for people's health?
It goes much deeper than just convenience, right? It's about recognizing that pharmacies are more than just places to pick up pills, especially in communities where seeing a doctor isn't always easy. They play a critical role in healthcare access.
It's about that human connection, that personalized care you don't get from just clicking a button online, right?
Absolutely. Dr. Tamara Hughes, a pharmacist and professor, she put it perfectly. She talked about how she knew her patients personally, their families, their health histories. That kind of connection, that familiarity, it makes a world of difference.
It's like that trusted friend, someone who knows you and your family and is always there to lend a helping hand.
Exactly. Dr. Hughes emphasized how pharmacists, particularly in underserved communities, often act as that first line of defense, filling the gaps in healthcare access.
They become these trusted guides, those go-to people for advice, especially for those who might not have regular access to a doctor.
Precisely. She even shared a story about how every hour she would literally find herself stepping out from behind the counter to help someone choose an over-the-counter medication or offer advice for a simple ailment.
It's amazing how important that human touch is. You just can't replicate that through a screen or with some automated message, you know?
You said it. And unfortunately, that human element, that empathy, it often gets lost in this push for a more, transactional healthcare system.
Right. It's all about efficiency, but at what cost, right?
Exactly.
So with these local pharmacies disappearing, what happens to people in these pharmacy deserts? What are their options?
Well, it's not all doom and gloom. Like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. And we're seeing some new solutions emerge. Take telehealth, for example.
Oh, right.
It's becoming increasingly popular, allowing patients to basically have virtual consultations with doctors, no matter where they're located.
That's amazing for someone, say, in a rural community who might not be able to easily travel to see a specialist. But what about actually getting a medication?
And that's where things get really interesting. Alongside telehealth, we're seeing the rise of these prescription delivery services. We mentioned Amazon earlier, and their same-day delivery model is expanding rapidly. We're talking about bringing medications directly to the people's doorsteps, literally.
It is incredible how technology is stepping in to try and bridge the gap, isn't it?
It really is.
And it's not just Amazon. Ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft are offering prescription pickup and delivery now. Even some hospitals are stepping up and creating these in-house pharmacy services that cater to their local communities.
It's encouraging to see so many innovative approaches popping up. But we have to remember that technology isn't a magic solution. These tech solutions, they work great for those who are comfortable with technology, have reliable internet access, and can afford those extra costs that sometimes come with it, you know? But what about everyone else?
It makes you wonder, are we inadvertently creating a new kind of disparity, a digital divide in healthcare access? Are we, perhaps unintentionally, leaving behind the most vulnerable populations as we embrace this digital future? It feels like we're talking about two very different worlds colliding here.
Yeah, it's this weird clash between progress and, basic human needs.
Exactly. And we're saying, okay, technology, it's amazing, but it's not a magic wand that we can just wave and make these problems disappear.
Right, and this is where things get tricky, because how do we balance this, this need for efficiency, for embracing these tech advancements, with ensuring that everyone has equitable access to healthcare?
Because at the end of the day, we're talking about a fundamental right, aren't we? Access to healthcare shouldn't be a luxury.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to that idea of pharmacies being more than just pill dispensaries. They're part of the community, and when they disappear, that sense of community can erode.
It's like losing a lifeline for some people.
Exactly.
So where do we go from here? Are we just supposed to accept that these pharmacy deserts are inevitable? Or is there something we can do, as individuals, as communities, to try and change course?
I don't think we have to just accept it. Not at all. I think the first step is awareness, like we're doing now. Having these conversations, bringing this issue to light, that's crucial. And then advocating for better access, for policies that put patients' needs first. I think those are all important steps.
I love that. Advocacy. It's not just about complaining about the problem. It's about actively trying to be part of the solution.
Right. Because at the end of the day, we all have a role to play.
Well said. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of pharmacy deserts.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey.
We've covered a lot of ground, the causes, the consequences, even some potential solutions. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is the human element.
Absolutely.
Behind all those statistics and business decisions are real people whose lives are being impacted every single day.
And we can't forget about them.
Exactly. So as we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. The next time you fill a prescription, whether it's online or at your local pharmacy, take a moment to think about the journey that medication took to get to you, the people behind the counter, the systems in place. And ask yourself, is this system working? Is it working for everyone? And if not, what can we do, each one of us, to change that?
Powerful. I love it.
Because access to healthcare is not just a checkbox on a to-do list, it's about people's lives.
Well said.
Until next time.